If Etta needs me to be that father figure, then that's the role I'll be, because I see my role first and foremost is to be a man. And for me, I define being a man as also being a leader.
What's up, guys? Glad you're here today for this conversation with my friend Todd Palmer. He's a thought leader, CEO, executive coach, author, and most importantly, an awesome dad. If you're new to the show, I'm your host, John Vroman. This is the Front Row Dads podcast, where we want to talk to men who are committed to being family men with businesses, not businessmen with families. And if you're interested in leveling up your game as a father, husband, or family man, then you're in the right place. My guest today, Todd Palmer, is an incredibly successful businessman. His company, Extraordinary Advisors, helps guide leaders into programs of sustained profitability. He's a CEO of a 6-time Inc. 5000 company. He knows a thing or two about building businesses, the struggles that they face as a business owner. But what we're talking about today is how to transfer some of the lessons we learn in business into our families, and how some of the family lessons that we learn can help our businesses. But when you leave this show, you're going to be a better husband, father, and family man, and of course, a better businessman as well. My guest today, Todd, is a really authentic guy. He's a very vulnerable guy and really going to enjoy this conversation. And I want to thank you guys for taking time out of your day to become a better husband, father, and family man. Hey, before we get into it, I also want to thank you guys for spreading the word about the show. If you enjoyed this episode or any of the other episodes, pass them along to men that you know would benefit. And if you don't mind, drop over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. Just go to frontrowdads.com/review. It'll take you right there. It takes you about 60 seconds and it means the world to us. Let's get right into the show. Enjoy this conversation with Todd Palmer. Todd, welcome to Front Row Dads, man. I'm really excited about our chat today.
John, I've been looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on.
Dude, let's start. Where do we start here? How about life as a kid for you? Give us a quick snapshot if we can, so that the guys know who they're talking to today. Dude, who is Todd Palmer as a kid? Let's go back.
I've done probably 40 of these podcasts and media things lately, and no one's asked me that. So I'll do that. So I grew up in a very blue-collar home. Interestingly enough, when I was 5 years old, my father passed away. He was 45. He had me a little bit later in life. And within a 60-day window, I went from my mom being a stay-at-home mom to her going to work. My older brother went off to college, and my older sister went off to Arizona to get married. So I went from being, the center of everybody's universe to being essentially left with a babysitter while my mom went to work. And that really did shift and change my thought process from a couple perspectives. I think one, I was always seeking that father figure, and my older brother did an awesome job filling that role. But he was off at college 4 states away on an athletic scholarship, so he wasn't there every day. So it drew me to admire successful athletes. It drew me to admire successful people in business. So that role model thing was really unique to me. Then my mom remarried. I grew up on a farm, so I'm living in Detroit. Then I go out to live on a farm, and that was a really unique transition. So, I think the best way to really put it is I've led a very eclectic life as a child. Loved sports, loved movies, loved music. Was often very much times alone, which I think is, and then I became an entrepreneur, which doesn't surprise me because I'm very self-reliant. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of stick-to-itiveness. I have a lot of grit when it comes to those things. And I think a lot of that developed in childhood.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because oftentimes I think, at least I feel, and I've heard other guys feel, that we need to be kind of taking care of our kids a lot, making sure they've got activities, making sure that we want to provide all these opportunities for them. But sometimes just being alone and being, if you want to call it, bored, leads to that creativity, leads to that self-reliance, right? And I think that's a really important skill to have. So I know there's a balance there.
Sure, absolutely. And then with any balance, you can go out of balance.
Yeah, no doubt.
I know sometimes in my adult life, I was too overly self-reliant. And as a business person, for me, that created some imposter syndrome where I thought I had to have all the answers all the time.
Yeah.
Be all things to all people, and I wouldn't ask for help.
I can't relate to that at all, Todd.
No, most men and entrepreneurs can't, right? But the flip side of it, though, too, is that alone time was really a great place to dream.
Yeah.
A great place to get lost in, how do I solve this problem, or how do I create this opportunity, or I have this vision of something I'd like to accomplish. Yeah. And that's a really good place to go, and just to think. And being often when we go think, we're alone, and see successful entrepreneurs like a Mark Cuban who spends upwards of 3-4 hours a day reading by himself to get more knowledge. And so, to your point, I think any way to integrate that ability to be self-reliant and independent and have that, be comfortable with that alone time, but also be a contributing member to your family, to your business, to your society, is a good way to go.
Yeah. Let's talk about your family now and life as a dad and as a family man. Take us through that journey a little bit. I know you've got an older boy. I think you mentioned in his 20s, if I got that right.
Yeah, so my son is 27, and I've had a very interesting journey. So I was very lucky to be part of the 1% club here in Detroit, Michigan. And I got custody of my son in 1993. And at that time, only 1% of men who fought for custody actually got it.
Whoa.
And it's, tie that into the entrepreneurial thought process a little bit between both worlds is nobody told me that. Nobody told me I had a 99% chance of failing. And after I got custody, I was talking with my attorney, and he told me that little fact. And I said, why didn't you tell me? And he was really clear about it, because he was also a dad. He was like, had I told you, would you have fought so hard? Had I told you that your chances of succeeding were next to nothing, would you have done this, this, and this? And I said, wow, that's a really great point. Great life lesson. No, I may have talked myself out of it. So go, kind of to further answer your question, I raised my son by myself. It's him and I forever. So it was a boy raising a boy. I was 24 and he was 2. Fast forward to today, he's now 27 years old. He's an accountant. He's done quite well for himself from an education perspective. And now I'm still single. I'm with a young lady who I'm very much in love with, and we're having a really good time getting to know each other as a couple in the early stages of the relationship, less than 2 years. And she has a 9-year-old. And so now, for the first time in almost 20 years, I'm spending time with a little kid, which is really fascinating because I see the compare and the contrast of how I used to act. And not only am I dealing with, a young person, when I'm nearly 50 years old, but I'm also dealing with a young lady versus a young man, which adds a whole new set of complexities and a whole new set of opportunities. And it's been really an interesting ride that I didn't plan on taking at this stage of my life.
Yeah. Like most things that are important and meaningful in our life, they were, a lot of them are unplanned, right? Like I always said, I was just terrible at predicting the future, because if I would have looked back 20 years and tried to identify how the next 2 decades would have gone, starting at 20, at 43, where I stand now, I would have been nowhere close. No.
Well, and the crazy thing that I'm really learning is to live life on life's terms. Yeah. And to recognize that this young lady is going to make me into whom she needs me to be in her life at this stage. She has parents, she has a mother, she has a father. Her father's not very active in her life for a lot of different reasons. But at the end of the day, my job, like on a birth certificate, it says, there's a mother box and a father box. Well, there's maybe not that dad box. Maybe I can fit that role, or at least that guiding force, or that, she's a very small person. She's like 40 pounds and 4 feet tall. I'm not a small person. And she just, it's nice to be able to leave a legacy with her potentially. That's my hope anyways, to leave a positive legacy and impact her life in ways that are going to be maybe different than her dad, different than her mom, and leave her in a much better spot than when I met her. And that's really kind of the main reason why we're here, right?
Yeah. Let's talk about the practicality of that showing up for somebody, a 9-year-old. And when you're in a relationship, you're dating, right? And, or maybe it's beyond that. I don't know if that's the right term to use, but you're in a relationship with somebody. You said 2 years?
Correct.
Right. And so here's this 9-year-old who's actually with you at the office today, which is really awesome, by the way. I think there's
serendipity in our talk.
So cool. So cool. I love that. And my question is that we haven't explored this on this podcast really at all. But I know there's guys out there listening that are going to really relate to your situation. And I also want to say that if you're out there listening and you're married and you have a 9-year-old and you're like, well, because I'm not a single guy, I'm not dating, this isn't relevant for me, I'm going to tune out. I would challenge you to stay tuned in on this one, because I'm particularly interested, because not only is this like you're in an interesting spot of how to influence a 9-year-old that you're not a biological father to, but so many of the things that we talk about in Front Row Dads is like, how can we be influential? Not just we see dad, a lot of times we think about the influence we have with our own kids, our biological kids or our adopted kids or our kids that are most, if you were to, survey the world, right? Like the ones that are part of our immediate family. But I'm talking about the impact we have on any kid. the impact that, you started by talking about father figures in this role that we can have, this impact that we can have on the kids in our neighborhood, the kids that we meet along the way, the kids that we influence through any community that we're a part of. That's a really important part of this journey, because not only do I want to step up in that way for other people's kids and play some important role, but I hope they do it with my boys. Right? I hope that there's people out there who will take a moment to acknowledge, to listen, to guide, to direct, to help. So how specifically are you doing that? Because I could see there being a lot of dynamics to a situation like yours.
There is, and there is, and there isn't. I think at least the role I can only tell you, again, speak from experience, right?
Yes,
the only thing I can tell you about that is this: the process that I'm going through is one. First and foremost, if I will be the person she needs me to be. So if this 9-year-old young lady, her name is Etta, if Etta needs me to be that father figure, then that's the role I'll be, because I see my role first and foremost is to be a man. And for me, I define being a man as also being a leader. And there's a lot of, as you know, John, there's a lot of different ways to lead. But I think for me, I have to show up. I have to be consistent. I have to be present in conversations. I have to be present in what we do. I have to be consistent in regards to her education and what her homework responsibilities are. I have to be consistent with her bedtime. I have to be consistent. If I say I'm going to do something, I darn well better do it, because I think that sets the foundation for her to interact with a man. Then as she gets older, my hope is that she will choose to, hopefully as she's dating and going through those exploratory times, she'll recognize and use me as a benchmark of things that she found comforting. As her, right now, her father figure. She's on a highway of life. My job is to create the guardrails on that highway, so she can bounce in and out of those guardrails safely. And she can push those guardrails knowing that someone's going to catch her. My job isn't to have all the answers. My job is to enjoy that journey with her. And, the great part about it is, going back to my childhood, I had a lot of adult males who really stepped up as leaders and mentors for me. And they took me to lunch, and they talked to me about life, and they talked to me about business and education and sports and whatever I was interested in. So in my opportunity with Etta is, in some ways, it's a way to thank those gentlemen for stepping up for me, and those people for impacting my life. And, I'll say to your point about people, maybe who, hey, I don't want to listen, or this podcast doesn't apply to me. I think we can make an impact in one conversation that can stay with a young man or a young lady for the rest of our lives. And let me just give you a quick story. I gave a speech up in Toronto this past summer. It was under a heroes theme, and really the heroes theme, they assigned the superhero Thor to me. I'm a big guy, I got blonde hair. They assigned Thor to me.
Perfect role.
Exactly. It was my 27-year-old was like, "Oh, that's so cool." And it was like, "That's so cool." And I'm giving this speech to a mixed audience. I typically do entrepreneurial speeches or hiring speeches or whatever. This was a mixed group, and a friend of mine asked me to come. And got my car, drove 4.5 hours. Mixed audience. I'm like, "I hope this goes well." At the end of my speech, a 9-year-old boy named Alec comes up to me and thanks me for teaching him a life lesson. I'm like, "Holy cow, tell me more about it, little guy." And he goes, "Well, the name of the speech was Fail Forward into Success, A Hero's Journey." And at the time I only had 15 minutes on stage. I used the word fail about a dozen times. And Alex created a visual representation of that to him in the audience. And he had 12 boxes with the letter F in them. And there was an equal sign. At the end, there was the word success. And he said, "Mr. Todd, I'm not even close to failing until I reach a 13th failure." He goes, "I'm never going to fail." And he was so sweet and so genuine about it. And his mom was telling me about them being, first generation immigrants from overseas, and how that he didn't want to come to the speech. And now he has this visual representation, and he may never fail again. That's a legacy move for me. Mm-hmm. That's a move that this young man is, he may not remember it was Todd Palmer. He may not remember exactly, but he now sees the process of failing so differently than he did prior to me talking to him. And that's, as men and as women, I think those are the legacies we can leave with any kid.
Yeah, that's so cool. And you think about the impactful conversations that, we have with others and that others have had with us. You mentioned, people sitting down at lunch with you, or these father figures or influencers in your life. Any specific stories come to mind of people that said something to you, set you up in a way that taught you something really important, that somebody that was a hero for you as a kid?
So that's a great question. So when I was in college, I got a scholarship, an academic scholarship, and I was part of my responsibilities were to participate in the student newspaper. I got a writing scholarship, and my department head was a huge influence on me. His name was Mark Harris, and Mark one day took me to lunch, and I was talking to him about some of the struggles I was experiencing as a young man. And I said, "I just want to get it right. I just want to get it right." And he said to me, he's like, that there is no right or wrong to things. There is what impacts you, and there is how you can attack a situation differently. And academically, because you're putting so much pressure on yourself to quote unquote get it right. Why don't you just learn, and why don't you just enjoy the journey? And I said, well, okay, well, how do I do that? He goes, well, if you take one class here at the university, what would it be? And I said, you know what? I'd love to make a movie. Now, this is a small town community college. They don't have a movie department. This isn't UCLA. He goes, well, you know what? I know a professor who shoots movies on a part-time basis. I'll connect you with her, and you can do an independent study just so you can go through the experience of making a movie. And he goes, it's not going to be of Hollywood quality or anything else, but you can go through that process. And he goes, the joy is in the learning. The joy is in the process. You're thinking the joy is only in the income. And I've never forgotten that lesson.
Oh, that's a great one. You know, one of the things I love about stories like that is it just reminds me of the power that I have to be an influencer in people's lives, and to remember how deep my words can sink in to a young person, whether that's my kids or somebody else's kids. And not even the words, but the energy that you bring to conversations. I'm kind of running through in my head as we're talking all these experiences in my life that were monumental moments now. And at the time, I don't even think it was that monumental. But I look back and
exactly.
Yeah.
I think for me, the biggest thing I find, especially with younger people, with technology nowadays and everything being on text or Snapchat, is as adults, if we really I find for me to approach a young person with a massive sense of curiosity and an inquisitive nature and ask them questions that get them to think and stop for a minute, it can be completely transformational as compared to going to your kids and, well, how was your day at school? Good. All right, good. Well, as a parent, okay, I checked the box. I've asked my kid about their day at school. That's not a good question. So like a great question I find with Ed is, tell me one time today at school where you laughed, and tell me what made you laugh.
Yeah.
Completely shifts our paradigm.
Yeah.
And then when we're doing the homework, I said, well, instead of accepting I don't know the answer, like, well, if you knew the answer, if you knew how to get the answer, give me the first 2 steps you take in that process. And it breaks it down, instead of eating the elephant in one bite, we're breaking it into pieces. And she's slowly but surely evolving her thought processes. So now instead of saying, I just don't know and I want to quit, I'm at this bottleneck, and how do I get through this bottleneck? Can you help and teach me?
Now, clearly you've got an advantage here, which I think is a great advantage. And that is that you're a coach, and that you've led teams. Your companies have been on the Inc. 5000 list. You've been in a space where you've been trained and conditioned to ask certain questions, right? And to build relationships. I remember reading in your bio, and I shared this. I thought this was really cool. It said, Todd isn't happy unless his clients trust themselves as leaders and their decisions, which is really what you're talking about in many ways. Is you're creating a growth mindset for Etta.
Right.
You're not trying to tell her how to get the answer, but how to approach things, how to be a problem solver, how to work hard at something, which I think is the best skill of all, right? And I think that's so cool. It also goes on to say in your bio, and of course I'm not telling you, but I'm telling everybody listening, is that says Todd won't rest until his teams trust the leaders and each other, which I think is really cool. So I wanted to get to this, and I think this is a great transition point to talk about trust, right? And how to build trust, because a lot of times our work life, the benefit of that is that and a lot of guys listening are very entrepreneurial in their endeavors in life, and they've worked really hard to build their businesses, right? For maybe decades, maybe not, maybe longer. But the idea is that a lot of our work accomplishments can inform our parenting and our life at home. And our life at home can often affect our business, right? So talk to us a little bit about that. I'm going to open this question up to kind of let you run where you want with it, but I'm interested in the trust factor But I'm also interested in really just the bigger question of how has your work affected your ability to parent?
Sure.
And what are you able to, to bring over?
So I think the biggest thing, and this is what I tell my clients that I work with, I have an advisory practice, extraordinaryadvisors.com. And I certainly talk about the 4 pillars of business, cash, strategy, execution, and people. But I spend most of my time working with my clients on their mindset. And the mindset of a leader is they have to be authentic, transparent, and vulnerable. And when they're ATV, authentic, transparent, and vulnerable, in front of a group, in front of their team, in front of their spouse, in front of their children, the answers and the response they get is where the trust is built. There's nothing worse than for a team to sit there and watch their leader pontificate about how great they are and how smart they are and how they did this as the leader. A leader who speaks from I statements in the media or in front of the board or in front of Wall Street is going to lose the credibility and trust of their team. A father or a mother who speaks with I statements in regards to family successes, or the parent who says, Johnny or Janie wouldn't be at this university if it wasn't for me, or they wouldn't be a good athlete if it wasn't for me. They're setting themselves up for a massive amount of failure. They're going to be alone. They're going to not be trusted by others when we take credit for things we didn't do. So in order for me to really help my clients break through is I help them figure out, why don't they trust? What are they afraid of? And I tell my clients all the time, I still use a coach. I hired my first coach in 2006, and I've used a different coach now for 5 years. And the thing we talk about the most is leadership mindset, not the execution. And it's about thinking about intentions, not having expectations. It's about thinking of abundance, not about having limitations. And it's about approaching things instead of with an either or philosophy. How about an and both philosophy? And it really ties a lot of times to leaders to getting to understand a philosophy called yes, no, yes. And that anchors in what your core values are. Your core value is something that you're going to stick to. So if someone asks you to do something against your core value, the real quick lesson is, yes, I really believe in this belief. I have this belief. Yes, I'm going to stick to it. So no, I'm not going to do what you asked me to, but yes, I will do this instead. So if someone, an employee, we do this with a lot, an employee says, my core value is family first. Okay, great. Your boss asks you to work late, or your boss asks you to come in on a Saturday. Well, and you got your son's football game or your daughter's dance recital. What we'll teach them is, yes, I'm going to anchor in my core value is family first. No, Mr. Supervisor, I'm not going to be able to come in on Saturday. Yes, what I'm willing to do is I'm willing to stay late 2 days this week to really get caught up on the work that needs to be accomplished. So you're going to honor and getting the work product done, but you're not necessarily going to do it on someone else's time schedule.
I love that. I think that's really great. I can see a lot of applications for that. And I have some friends that teach professional improv. Improv HQ is their company, Betsy and Zoe, and they talk about yes and.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And I had a really hard time processing that in the beginning because I constantly want to say, but, and somebody makes a comment, and my son makes a comment, my wife makes a comment, and I'm like, I want to say yes, but. Yeah, right. But here's another way of looking at it. And I've realized that yes and, or what we're doing is we're saying, yes, I hear you.
You're acknowledging, exactly.
Yeah, we're not saying, yes, I agree with you. Yes, that's now going to be my new belief. Yes, I'm going to do what you say. It could be, yeah, I hear you. That's, and I'm going to add something to this dialogue. It's actually one of the building principles of our Front Row Dads community is you don't have to always stand in opposition of somebody or tell somebody why they're wrong, right? Like if somebody makes a point about fatherhood in the group and it's like, you don't have to go in and be like, I disagree 100%. You don't have to say that. I mean, you can, but you can also just make your point. You could say, hey, thanks for sharing. Here's my point of view. There are moments in life, and of course, it's all context of when you need to take a stand against something. That's wrong. We're not about that, right? Of course, there's moments like that. But so many times we don't have to fight so hard against something. We can just like, hey, I acknowledge that you have a thought about that. And I'm feeling that, and here's my take on it.
To that point, it's funny. The thing that crossed my mind when you were sharing that was, well, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?
Yeah, right,
And
exactly.
it's important to recognize that, especially with kids. And it's funny, I was sharing this with Etta the other day. I said, every time you say "but," you're negating what you just told me.
Mhm.
So I said, she said, "Yes, I did my homework, but I didn't complete it." Well, okay. So we went through a couple of examples, and she wasn't aware, and even her mother wasn't aware that the phrase "but" often for a lot of people negates what you've already said. And it's often under the pretext of either being right or being in a power position. And I work with my leaders significantly to do like you were saying, hey, this and I even did an exercise with somebody where he had an employee that was going to be leaving his company, and he was very upset. And that employee was wrong, and I'm right, and they're wrong. And we simply stripped off the two names of the people and just made a list. So here's everything person one believes and wants in life. Here's everything person two wants in life and believes in life. And you take the names off, and you objectively look at what each of those individuals wanted. There's nothing wrong with either list.
Yeah.
And so they could both be right, and they could both be happy, but they just couldn't continue to work together, which, a lot of times, and I teach a process where, it's firing with compassion, where you lay out the objective of, when you let somebody go, you're often freeing them up to go do something they should have already been doing.
Yeah.
Same concept.
my friend Cameron Harold teaches that idea too. I've heard him talk about that a good bit. That's great, man. I love that. Let's dig in a little more deeply to the authenticity, transparency, and vulnerability piece. I feel that, and we could talk for hours on any of these subjects, but I really wanted to get to this one because I think I struggle with this as well. It's just how authentic, transparent, or vulnerable should I be? Right? There's a
it certainly depends on the audience you're in front of.
Right. No doubt about that. And actually, this topic has come up in so many different areas of life for me. In our charity, I was talking with a woman who wrote a book called Alongside, and it's actually how to support somebody in their time of trial. And we were talking about how transparent or vulnerable or authentic could you possibly be with somebody who's facing cancer, right? What do you say? How open or bold could you be? And she talks about tiers of relationships, tier 1, 2, 3, 4. And based on where that relationship is with you, it changes how you approach them. So I love how this shows up a lot. And I think this is actually really tough for a lot of guys. I think this is a real struggle of how open, how transparent, how vulnerable. Because I remember as a kid feeling like, I wanted to connect with my dad on this particular idea. And I was I was probably 15, 16. I was getting into some trouble. I was in a dangerous path. And I remember saying to my dad something to the effect of like, well, what have you done when you were a kid that's really crazy? Oh, he said something like, I'm more like you than you probably think I am.
Right. Yeah.
And he was trying to say like, I've been down, like, I'm not totally ignorant, dude.
Sure.
I may be more like you than you think. And I wanted to challenge him on that. I was like, okay, well, tell me, because I actually don't know. You've never told me a story that I can relate to, that you have any idea of what I'm going through right now, like where I'm at in my life. And he was like, well, I've done some pretty risky things. And I remember him opening up and telling me about something risky that he did. And I remember thinking, dude, that's not risky at all. Like and my guess is he was trying to connect, but he was probably not trying to tell me his worst thing. Because imagine as a dad, right? You want your kid to know that you have done some things, you've traveled down the path, whatever it is, like you've made some mistakes, but you also don't want to tell your kids some things that wasn't even on their radar. Give them ideas of things that does that make sense of what I'm,
yeah.
Well,
so certainly the conversations I have with my 27-year-old are very different than the conversations I have with my 9-year-old, and the authenticity, transparency, and vulnerability I bring to each person is going to be different. I had the really, really unique opportunity many years ago to spend just a little bit of time with a baseball manager by the name of Jim Leland. He was managing the Detroit Tigers at the time. And I asked him, I said, you're in a room with 25 millionaires, basically. You're the lowest paid guy in the room, yet they're going to all follow you over that hill, and they're going to compete for you, in the metaphorical world, to the death in the game of baseball. How do you work with 25 personalities? Most of them have high school degrees or less. A lot of them are foreign born, and they're making more money than you. How do you do? He goes, oh, it's really easy. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like the sky's going to open up. I made this pearl of wisdom. I'm like pins and needles, right? On eggshells. Tell me, Jim, impart your wisdom upon me. It's really easy. because I manage them all the same. I manage them 25 different ways. And that's what I would bring to the ATV conversation. You've got 25 people. I would interact with them 20, each of them at a different level. So I may interact with my partner, Jennifer, on a very raw and real level about certain things. Whereas with my 27-year-old son, I may tell him a surface piece and not go into the depth. And for the 9-year-old, I may not even bring it up. But when it comes to talking to her about maybe her fear of a movie, or maybe her fear of the dark, or whatever, I can be very real and very authentic as compared to being dismissive, which a lot of parents do. Oh, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine. It's just the dark. See, there's nobody in your class. Hey, honey, I remember when I was 9 and I was scared of this, this, and this. And this is how I reacted to it. And let me just kind of sit with you and let's talk about what your fears are. What do you think is going to potentially happen? And calm her mind down and get her out of fight or flight to a higher operating system. Because I think for me, when people are authentic, transparent, and vulnerable with me about something I'm afraid of, wow, I feel like I've got somebody who I can walk the path with. When they're transparent and speak from like a Gestalt protocol perspective of experience, not of judgment or advice, it goes a whole lot smoother because I don't feel judged or I don't feel like I've got to take their advice. Right. So I think for me, whether it's a business colleague, whether it's my partner, whether it's my 27-year-old or my 9-year-old, I really do want to bring an age-appropriate, experience-appropriate level of ATV with them. Is going to interact best with them. I may sit with my accountant. In 2006, my business was not in a really good spot. And I sat with my coach and my accountant and said that the numbers are awful. How do I handle that? And then I had to repackage those awful numbers to go home and have a conversation with my partner at the time and share with her, yeah, this is the reality. This is my brutal reality. Here's what I'm going to do to get out of that reality. I'm going to try my darndest, but this is where we could go. Here's how I'm going to handle it. This is what you're going to see from me to set the expectation. It's like Jim Collins talks about in Good to Great with the Stockdale paradox. It's not just being positive, but it's acknowledging your brutal reality and having faith that you'll get through it, having faith that you'll overcome it, and leading your team through it. But so for me, there's never been just one way to apply ATV.
Yeah, I think it's great that you say that because I keep wanting there to be one way, but I don't think there is. And so, do you get to the point where is it just trust your gut? Is that what it is? Is it ultimately come down to you got to check in and be really honest with yourself and really?
Oh, no. It's all for me. It always starts. Exactly. For me, it always starts with myself. So, I mentioned that earlier that I still use a coach, even though I do coaching. And one of the best things that I find I can get from him is, I'll wake up and I'm like, yeah, something just feels off within me. And I'll try to process it. And I'll try to stay in a higher thinking plane. Like, it's all ties to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If at a baseline, I'm feeling safe or in fight or flight for danger reasons or hunger reasons or sleep deprived reasons, that certainly takes me to a different level. Mm-hmm. But if I'm thinking, all right, I want to have this conversation with this person. Here's what I'm thinking of saying. Their reaction is going to be really bad, and I still want to have it anyways. That's an immediate trigger like, hey, I should reach out to my coach, have a call with him, do a debrief, and find a different way to say it that will be better heard, because my overall goal is for that message to land properly and safely and effectively. And I know if part of my gut's telling me, yeah, when I talk to John today and I say this, this, and this, it's going to go poorly. I should probably get a little pre-coaching on that. So especially for leaders going into their teams to talk about tough financial outcomes or tough performances or big changes, but no different than if a husband or a wife needs to come home and tell their family that they're going to be moving, or that mom or dad is changing a job, or mom or dad maybe has lost their job.
Yeah. Well, here's something. And let me chime in with like a real example of this. Okay. Now I need you to put on your coach hat for me, Todd.
Let's go, John. I'm ready for you.
Let's go. So here's what's happened, right? This is a real scenario. So I've for the last 10 years, I've been a professional keynote speaker, right? And I've done well to provide for my family with that. However, in the last 2 years, it's become more and more clear to me that my place is with Front Row Dads. And so this is now my all-in. This is my full-time gig. I'm still taking speeches at a certain fee, but last year I had 40 paid speeches. This year I have 2 on the calendar, right?
Wow, that's a shift.
It's a massive shift. And so one of the things is that my wife and I sat down with the budget and we said, okay, we need to make some changes. And so we can't live that same lifestyle that we've lived in the past, that we need to make some changes here. And so then the question is, well, my son's in all these activities, like a ton of activities. And I added up the number and I said, this is what we're spending on Tiger every month.
Sure.
And we're like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even know that was the number. And we're like, we're going to have to probably cut out a couple of these activities, which arguably I think might be a benefit anyway, regardless if it was for a financial reason. But then the question is, if I come to Tiger and I talk with him about it, how honest am I with Tiger? See, one of the things I wrestle with is, do I talk him through the financial situation, and how much do I talk him through a financial situation? Because I want him to understand maybe why we're doing this, that he didn't do something wrong, that he's not being punished. But is it like, hey, he's 9 years old, right? At 9, do I really need to bring that up? And so my place right now is to talk about it, talk about how I'm making a transition in my business, and the finances are going to be shifting a little bit, which means we need to make some difficult decisions over here. Right. But I still wrestle a little bit with like how open and honest to be with him with my words. Right. And sometimes I feel like I get a little too direct with him, where I'll say something and my wife is like, well, you probably shouldn't have told him that. And I'm like, I think that's really important. But that's a conflict with us sometimes too, is how much I tell my son, whether we're talking about a suicide. He asked me the other day what suicide is.
Sure.
Right. And we were talking about that. It's like, how open and honest do you be about the sex talk? How open and honest do you be about finances? How open and honest can you be about problems in the world? Things like that. I don't know, man. But I'm still struggling with like, did I approach that the right way? How should I approach that with him? Am I doing the right things? I don't know.
So let's talk about it. So since you put it out there, so I would, if we were in a coaching session, I would hopefully have done some pre-work. And I would know what your core values as John are. Right. And I would want to know your core values first and foremost, you as an individual. A lot of people will identify themselves, well, I'm a mom or a dad first. I think the reality is you're a person first. And the only person in the entire world you spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year with is you. Because you're in your own head all that time, even when you're sleeping, even in your subconscious. So I'd start there with you, John. And then I would go to ask you, what is your core value that's causing you to want to make this professional shift? And then you tell me, I believe in this, or I believe in, I can make my legacy play here. I can make my biggest impact in the world, or whatever that's going to be. And if you want, we can actually go through this. But if in an abbreviated situation, they ask you what your core values are. I'd ask you with an open and honest heart, how would you express that to your son? These are my values.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So I'd say, John, what are your core values, and what are those core values that you're currently going through? Why are you making this transition professionally?
So I believe that value to be family, that I want to be home with my kids, right? So
are you willing to trade time for money? You're going to have flexibility, yes, which is going to equal the time, which is going to cause you to give up potentially in the short term the finances. Are you comfortable with that?
Yep, totally.
And can you explain to me why that's a greater value to you than the money?
Yeah, because I feel like I can always make more money. I just can't go back and get the time with my kids. Okay,
perfect. So that's going to then create this transition in your business. So was this a difficult decision for you?
Huge. Well, yes and no. In some ways I struggled through the decision because there's a lot of emotion behind it. There's a lot of shift of like, the impact it'll make on my family financially. But once I got there, that this was the right move, that it wasn't more money that was going to make our family better. It was more time, me being at home and more engaged with my kids. So then it was easy once I made the decision.
So perfect. So now let's kind of go fast forward a little bit, because we are pressed for time. And you're going to anchor your long-term plan, which is you're going to trade. You want the time with family. That's a core value for you. Let me ask you this. If you were to know on your deathbed, you were a good dad to your son, what would that look like, and what kind of person would your son be?
I think my son would just be fulfilled and happy. I want him to find purpose and meaning in life.
Okay.
Which I think leads to that fulfillment.
Right. So you, and I have a whole speech on the difference between being happy and being satisfied, because they're very different. If you want to be happy, eat lots of chocolate, enjoy the stuff. But if you want to be fulfilled, which is where I'm going to go with you on this. So if you want your son to have a fulfilled life, you want your son to have a life of satisfaction, there are going to be challenges along the road.
Yeah.
So you may want to suggest, I would suggest you might want to say to your son, hey, buddy, this is dad's vision. This is the life I want to live. This is the life I want to give to our family. And that's going to make me feel satisfied as a man and as a father. Let's approach your world of your spend in your athletic events or whatever you're spending the money on. How do we look at that from a curious perspective, buddy? So you're doing these 5 events. Is there a way that you can see and you can participate in creating an and both scenario? For example, he may say to you, yeah, Dad, well, these 5, I really only love 3. I'd be happy to give up 2. He's now participating in the decision. You're not top downing it. He would say, Dad, I love all 5. You know what I might be able to do is I might be able to take on a dog walking job where I can pay, I can earn $50 a week, which will pay for my skateboarding. I'm just kind of making this up as we go, John, but you're including him in the conversation. You say, and then you can wrap it up by saying, hey, we have now, not I, John, as dad, but we as John and John's son have reached a collective combined decision that's going to give you both a satisfied life and the life you want to have as a man versus either or.
Yep. I love that. So I just wrote down, and I think this is of huge value to me, is tell Tiger why switching the businesses or why this shift aligns with my values or our family values. Like
Correct.
Really explaining that is that's really great. And then also having him help me with the solution.
Right.
People support what they help create, right? So,
exactly. And that's a true demonstration of leadership for him. Someday he could be, this successful executive, for lack of a better description, and he's going to anchor back like, I've got to make these difficult decisions with my company or with my team or with my family. Wow, 5 brains are bigger than 1 brain.
Yeah,
5 sets of experiences are bigger than 1 set of experiences. In your case, he may see the problem completely different than you. And it may free up a completely different conversation, and he's gonna participate in solving the problem.
Yep.
Because he might say to you in the conversation, "Gee, Dad, I just don't know." Yeah. So here's a real good way to address it. Well, buddy, I get you don't know, but if you did know, give me one idea of what, in a crazy way, this might look like.
Yep.
Well, I could do this, or I might be able, or I can combine these. It's just triggering that event in his brain to fire slightly differently so that he's able to come up with possibilities in abundance, not limitations and threats.
Love it. It's great, man. Well done, Coach. Well done. That's wonderful.
Well, you're a great student. You're very coachable, John.
Yeah. The answer to that, by the way, that is a true statement. I really do feel like I'm very coachable. I've always tried to balance the being confident and being humble at the same time. It's a struggle, but I've really tried to be a good student, and be open-minded to somebody telling me. I used to be really stubborn, but I think I've grown in that area to be open to different ways of looking at things. So thanks.
And that might be something you might want to share with your son. Hey, buddy, I used to be really stubborn on this stuff. And I used to think I had to have all the answers. I'd like to approach this differently with you. Are you open? Are you willing to have this conversation with me?
Yeah. Yep. Todd, I know we have just a few minutes left, but I want to ask a couple questions that I think you might be able to give a few words of wisdom or a couple suggestions or resources to our guys out there listening. One is that any advice about being a single dad, if you're to look back at your journey and a dad out there is listening and he's a single dad, whether these are words of encouragement or a strategy or a book or a resource or anything for those guys listening, because you've traveled that path. I realize it's a broad question, but take it where you want.
So I think to any single dads or even single moms listening, don't think you have to be perfect. Parents that I know who are in a dual family relationship aren't perfect. And so cut yourself a little slack and realize you are doing the best you can, but also kind of like our host today, John, be open to feedback from others, be open to coaching, and recognize that your kids are your legacy. And they are a big part of who you are today and who you will be when you're gone. And whatever you can do, be present in what you're doing. And a lot of parents struggle with this. And let me just give me a slight chance to elaborate on that. A lot of dads, for example, will say, well, I showed up to all their events, or I showed up to the dance recital, I showed up to the football game. And those are all great. The kids know when your body's there and your mind is elsewhere. Yep. And if you're married, your partner knows if your body's there and your mind is elsewhere. So be fully present wherever you are. They call it the precious present for a reason. So if you can give your family that precious present when you're with them, and if you can cut yourself a little slack and not have to be perfect, I think that'll go a long way.
All right, cool. I've got 4 questions and 4 minutes. Are you ready?
I'll be as concise as possible.
You could literally answer these in an hour too. So I respect that, the challenge here. When you think of a great dad that you've seen, been witness to, that's been part of your world, what name comes to mind? Who is it and why?
I would say my brother, Greg Palmer. He's the first person that comes to mind because he was a very different guy in his 30s and 40s, and now he's a really different guy in his 50s and 60s, and how he's evolved at being present with his family, how he's evolved and challenged himself to grow beyond maybe some things that he saw as limitations. And his kids all live within a 10-minute drive of him. His kids are all participating in his life and his wife's life. And they're in their 60s. The kids are in their 20s, 30s, and going to their 40s now. And he's going to be a grandfather soon. And his joy of living his family first thought process and how he takes care of those people, how he works in his community of being a mentor and a role model for at-risk youth and programs he's working with them on, not just giving his money, but giving his time and giving his knowledge and insight and his wisdom. That's somebody I strive to emulate. And he's my family member, but he's really knocking it out of the park.
What's your most cherished family tradition, or one that you've seen in other families that you really admire?
I think it's a simple one. The family eats together.
Yeah.
Every night, if possible, for dinner.
Yeah. It's great. A book suggestion for all dads?
There's a book out there called The Freak Factor. And you think, wow, what a strange name for a book for families, right? But it talks so much.
Or the perfect name for a book.
Yeah, exactly. Depends on your family, right? And it's by one of my favorite guys, David Rendell. And David he certainly uses a lot of business analogies, but he also does a freak factor for kids. And in that, he talks about that what's weird makes you wonderful. And when you say that to a child, what's weird makes you wonderful, the sense of being accepted by your family and hopefully being accepted by your peers is so enormous. And there's so many kids that are struggling feeling accepted today. So the freak factor helps you figure out how to best convey what weird makes you wonderful to adults and children alike.
That's a great point. I love that. Last of all, Todd, this has been really fun, by the way. I certainly enjoy your ideas that you shared and your stories.
Oh, thank you.
Also really enjoy the way in which you shared them and the way in which you showed up today for the interview. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Where can people connect with you?
So the best place for folks to connect with me if they enjoy the conversation today is at my website, extraordinaryadvisors.com. And what I primarily do there is I work with leaders and CEOs in developing their mindset and helping them with the 4 pillars of business. But anybody who's listening today that just wants to have a conversation about parenting or struggles with leadership in the family or in the business, I'm happy to give you an hour for free of my time to talk with you, to hear what's going on with you, to maybe do some coaching like John and I did today, to really create that legacy within you and your community, within your family. So go to extraordinaryadvisors.com, mention you heard me on John's podcast, and that you want to schedule a time in. I promise anybody who reaches out, I'll give you an hour. We can talk about it. I'm not looking to get anything out of this. It's just more of my ability to pay forward within your audience, but also in a weird way through the karmic universe to reach back to the people who helped me when I was a young guy, or even as a current guy who were mentors for me and listened to me. So I'm happy to listen for an hour.
It's awesome. Todd, thanks again for being our guest, brother. I wish you all the best. And as we record this, we're heading into the holidays. So please enjoy all of that. And just really thanks for leading. Really appreciate you.
John, thank you so much. This is one of my favorite podcasts I've ever been on. I've really enjoyed the theme, and it's great to talk about being a parent and being a leader.
I hope it's the start of other meaningful conversations for sure.
Hey guys, if you haven't already done so, go right now to frontrowdads.com/Facebook and join the conversation that's happening right now online. We designed this group for guys who are entrepreneurial in their thinking, that are high performing guys with low egos. We're looking for the dads that believe in teaching their kids how to think, solve problems, and be real leaders. We're looking for guys who believe in being family men with businesses, not businessmen with families. We're looking for the fathers who have great knowledge, but also believe that they have so much more to learn. And we're looking for men who want to add value by sharing their wisdom and those that are willing to ask the questions that we all need and want answers to. That's frontrowdads.com/Facebook, or simply go to Facebook, type in Front Row Dads, and you'll get to our group. And what we put in there, links to all the podcasts and videos and other resources that you can't get access to anywhere else except for in this group. We want to give you the best ideas to help you with your marriage, balancing work and family life, communication strategies with your spouse and also your children, travel ideas, and even suggestions on the latest gear that would save you time and help you be more effective. We've got updates on upcoming events and so much more. Go right now to frontrowdads.com/Facebook and join the conversation. I'll look forward to connecting with you there.